Happy Veterans Day and welcome to NASA Television's live coverage of the launch of Orbital ATK's Commercial Resupply Services 8 mission to the International Space Station. The Orbital ATK Cygnus cargo vehicle, with its 7,385 pounds of supplies, including dozens of science experiments, is ready to deliver its cargo on top of the Antares rocket, with everything looking good for today's planned 6:37 a.m. Central Time launch from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport's Pad 0A at the Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, where the sun had just showed up about 20 minutes ago, ushering in what looks to be a great day for a launch. We have multiple teams working through today's preparations in anticipation of that launch coming up in just about 36 minutes now. There at Wallops, there's the team at the Launch Control Center, led by Orbital Launch Director Kurt Epperly. In Dulles, Virginia, there's the Orbital ATK Mission Control Complex, led by Cygnus Mission Director Kenneth Peak. And of course, we're here at NASA's Mission Control Center in Houston, inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room, with a team led by Flight Director Emily Nelson. I'm NASA TV commentator Brandy Dean, and I'm joined today by Amanda Davis, Orbital ATK's Director of Program Management at the company's Chandler, Arizona facility. Amanda's here to offer up some insight behind-the-scene knowledge on what goes into getting Cygnus and Antares ready for launch. Thanks so much for coming out to Houston, Amanda.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Amanda and I will also be taking questions from social media leading up to the launch. So if you've got one to send in, you can get it to us by using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll be taking those a little later. Here on the ground, the team's been working hard for about how long would you say, Amanda?
Well, from the day that the first circuit card assembly is started to be made and the propellant constituents are made, that's almost 2 years. But thankfully, we're on constant production, so that way it only takes a matter of months for us to put the final assembly together at Wallops and then roll out and launch.
I think we're having a little bit of trouble with the audio, so give us just a second to adjust.
I think maybe I'm back on now.
Okay, you want to say that again? About how long does it take?
Sorry about that. So from the time that the first circuit card assemblies are made to the propellant constituents, we have just, that takes about 2 years. But thankfully, we're in constant production of those items. So when we do the final integration in Wallops, it's only a matter of a few months, and then we roll out to launch.
And your team has done this a number of times now. I think this is the 8th Cygnus mission. So is it getting to be routine? Are you pretty well got the process down?
Yes and no. So it does get easier. We learn things, and that makes the integration go by a lot faster. However, there's always new problems that come up every time, so there's always new challenges, and that's the best part of rocket science, is that there's always something new that you get to learn and discover, and problems to go fix. But
Right.
it does get a little better.
That's good. Well, I know that one of the last steps, of course, is the rollout to the launch pad, which actually happened on Thursday, and I believe we have some video to show of that. You've been at the Wallops for previous launches, right, Amanda? Is this something that everyone gathers to watch?
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of great places to watch. There's Chincoteague Island that's just across from Wallops Island, and there's a lot of great places people can watch. The best part of being live there at the launch is to feel the rumble in your chest, and you can actually feel the heat on your face as the rocket lifts off. So if anyone ever has a chance to go down there, I highly recommend going to watch a launch.
And we're seeing the rollout here. It took place on Thursday. Of course, this is sped up quite a bit. It's a pretty slow process to move a rocket.
Yeah, that's about 5 miles an hour of driving you see there. It's just over a mile from our horizontal integration facility down to the pad. But it's quite a production. We do make sure we're monitoring Cygnus the whole time, making sure it's powered on and everything in the cargo is safe as we go out to the pad. There's a lot of activity going on right now. It doesn't look like a whole lot that there are just people watching, but when we lift the vehicle, again, there's a lot of systems that we're monitoring. And after the vehicle is erected, we start to connect all the propellant lines.
And there it is at the launch pad, and Of course, that wasn't really the end of work. It hasn't just been sitting there since it was rolled out. What goes on between then and today?
Well, there's 24/7 operations. I mean, from the moment it starts to roll out to the moment it lifts off, there is something to be done. Every minute is accounted for, so there's a lot of activity going on. So we connect the propellant lines, we can do leak checks on those, and then one of the biggest items is the combined systems tests, where we put the avionics of Antares together with Cygnus and the pad controls, and we make sure all of those systems work together. So that's a big box we check about a day before launch.
Great. And everything, like we said, is looking good for a launch, which is now 31 minutes away. And just this morning, the launch control teams have been at Wallops since, I think, about midnight Central Time. They had a poll for readiness for Antares to go onto external power just after 2 a.m. and another one before kicking off the loading sequencer timeline just before 3 a.m. And then there was a 20-minute hold at 4:37, 2 hours before the launch, before the countdown picked back up at the T-minus 1 hour and 30-minute mark. And a little over an hour ago, they began loading the Antares with that propellant that you'd mentioned. And now the next big milestone coming up, I think in just a few minutes, is when we'll hit the planned 10-minute hold at 6:17 a.m. Central. And then during that hold, the control teams will conduct a poll to make sure everything's ready to proceed with the final countdown and get us through that last 10 minutes before launch. Assuming they get a go, the poll will resume at T-minus 10 at 6:27, and things will really get going at 6:33 when the auto sequencers start for the terminal phase of the countdown that's begun. And once again, the liftoff time is 6:37 a.m., and that is 30 minutes away now. After liftoff, it'll take Cygnus about 9 minutes to get into space and just under 2 days to reach the International Space Station, where Expedition 53 crew is going to be waiting for it and all its cargo. You can see a timeline of its ascent here on the screen, starting with the launch at 6:37. That'll be quickly followed by main engine cutoff, and then a number of other milestones that get us actually into orbit. Do you want to run through those for us, Amanda?
Sure, the steps to orbit. So when we do the liftoff, the stage one will burn about 3.5 minutes, and then after stage one SEP, we coast for about a minute, and there's actually a performance benefit with that. It's also where we deploy the fairing. So Cygnus is tucked inside a fairing to protect it on ascent from all the heating from going through the atmosphere. So we deploy that fairing in the inner stage, and then stage two will ignite and burn for about 2.5 minutes. And then we coast again for about 2 minutes, and that's just to steady everything out before we release Cygnus and send it on its way.
All right, and everything again is looking good for that planned 6:37 a.m. Central Time liftoff. And then it will reach its destination about 2 days later on Monday, where as I said, the Expedition 53 crew will be waiting for it at the space station. European Space Agency flight engineer Paolo Nespoli and NASA's Randy Bresnik, the station commander, are going to be the primary members responsible for grabbing onto Cygnus on Monday. But their crewmates, NASA flight engineers Joe Acaba and Mark Vandehei, as well as Russian flight engineers Alexander Misurkin and Sergei Rosansky, are all going to be glad to see its arrival as well. Speaking of the crew, it's appropriate to note today that 5 of them have served in the military of their countries, including all 3 of the NASA astronauts on board. Randy Bresnik served in the U.S. Marine Corps, Joe Acaba in the Marine Corps Reserves, and Mark Vandehei in the Army. So they were eager to take some time out of their schedules this past week to send down a special message in honor of the veterans that have served in the United States.
Greetings from the International Space Station. I'm retired Marine Corps Colonel and Space Station Commander Randy Bresnik of NASA, along with my NASA crewmates, retired Army Colonel Mark Vandehei and former Marine Corps Reservist Joe Acaba. It's our pleasure as members of the Armed Services to salute all veterans on this Veterans Day. NASA's connection to the military dates back to the agency's founding, when so many of our early astronauts came from our armed services. Today, many of our colleagues throughout NASA are still current or former members of the military.
Some of our colleagues pay the ultimate price in the name of space exploration. But as we orbit the Earth today, our thoughts and devotion is to all veterans, but especially those service members who gave their lives to defend our great nation and the freedom we cherish.
As you celebrate Veterans Day, join me in saluting a veteran. Tell them how grateful you are for their service. All veterans are a special breed. They understand what sacrifice means and how it allows us to enjoy our democracy, which gives us the ability to continue to learn and to explore.
In closing, from all of us here on the International Space Station to all veterans, we cannot say thank you enough for your service and sacrifice on behalf of our nation. You will never be forgotten.
And we just want to add our thank you to all the veterans out there watching today. We appreciate all of your service. And actually, the Cygnus launching today in just 25 minutes now is named after another veteran and former astronaut, Gene Cernan. Cernan, who died in January, was selected as an astronaut in 1963 and made 3 trips to space. His first was on Gemini 9 in 1966 when he became the second American to perform a spacewalk. He returned in 1969 for Apollo 10, which was the final mission to test systems and capabilities for the moon landing on Apollo 11, just 2 months later. And he made his own moon landing in 1972 on Apollo 17, the final Apollo mission. He was the last man to walk on the moon and made the famous remark that we leave as we came, and God willing we shall return with peace and hope for all mankind. Okay, ready to talk to those grips?
Sure.
We're now 24 minutes away from today's 6:37 a.m. launch. And Amanda, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Antares and Cygnus and what we can expect on its climb to orbit?
Okay, first I'll talk about Cygnus. You can see it there with its service module and the pressurized cargo module. This is the 5th flight of the enhanced Cygnus, which extended that pressurized cargo module. We have about 13,000 pounds of mass, or 3 large SUVs that take up all of Cygnus and its cargo. We have about 1,700 pounds of propellant, which are used to maneuver up to the space station, and then after all the experimentation, the unloading and loading back up of trash into Cygnus, then it takes up about 2 weeks to deorbit, and so that's what that propellant is used for. We have about 950 cubic feet of volume, and the height is about 6.4 meters, or about the height of a giraffe. Then we have the Antares, which is about 13 feet in diameter and 140 feet tall. That's the same as a 14-story building, so when it's out there on the pad and you're standing under it, it's quite amazing to see. The total liftoff mass, so that's with all the propellant loaded, is about 660,000 pounds. You can see Cygnus tucked in there in the top under the fairing. Then we have the second stage motor under it, the Castor 30 XL, which is made up in Utah. And our first stage, which is a liquid oxygen kerosene fueled, that has 2 RD-181 engines that power it. And here we go over an overview of the OA-8 mission that Cygnus will be launching on the Antares 230 config, the second launch of that configuration with an enhanced first stage. We have about 7,400 pounds of cargo, and then on the way down up to 7,400 pounds of garbage. And one can imagine if you're on the space station, you really want your garbage taken out. So after the astronauts take the cargo that we send up to them, they load it back up with trash, and it descends and burns up upon re-entry. And we're launching today from Virginia Space's Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport, which has a very cute acronym of MARS, and that's from Pad 0A. So our mission will be up to 90 days, where Cygnus will hang out at the space station and have its cargo unloaded. There's also some experiments that are going to happen within Cygnus this time, and then finally fill up with trash and come back down.
Thanks, Amanda. That's a great overview. And we are coming up now on the 10-minute hold, which starts at L-18 or 6:17 a.m. Central Time. And Amanda, could you tell us a little bit about what goes on during this hold and why we build it into the timeline?
Yes, so we only have a 5-minute window today. So if you were thinking there might be a delay and you might miss it, well, it's going to be 37 minutes from the hour or plus 5 minutes, and that's all. And the reason we do that is so that we can optimize the performance of the vehicle and as much cargo as we can get into Cygnus and take the least amount of time to get up to the space station. So if anyone's looked up in the night sky, you can see that the space station going overhead. So we try to make sure that we time it just right to get to the space station. So because of the only 5 minutes that you have to lift off, we put this hold in there as a little bit of contingency. We have a lot of operations to do with propellant loading and avionics last-minute testing and power on that we leave ourselves just a little bit of contingency. So thankfully, here we are at the hold, and we'll be ready to go right within our window.
Great. And you've been on the flight control team before, right?
I have. It's very exciting. The nerves just keep building and building the closer you get to this launch. So it's, you kind of wake up and you get started and you get your roll call. And today the team had to start really early, about 1 a.m., to get this launch at 7:37 on their time. So it's been a long day already, and they're probably getting really nervous about now. But things are sounding really good, and we're ready for liftoff.
Correct. Well, what are some of the duties that they have or that you had when you were on the flight control team?
So there's everyone has a different role that's there today. So we're monitoring temperatures and pressures, avionics health. So the vehicle, both Antares and Cygnus, use batteries, and so we do last-minute charges of those and make sure everything's good. And so one of the last-minute things they're doing now is transferring the vehicle from external power from the ground to the internal power. And once you start doing that and the final arming, that's when the nerves really get going. So we have a lot of electrical engineers that are doing a lot of these functions. We also have mechanical engineers that look at temperatures and pressures, and so there's a lot of folks that are there and monitoring the vehicle, make sure everything's ready.
And they'll be getting into that go, no-go poll, right, for kind of the final phase of countdown and launch. That's got to be an exciting time.
That is. There is actually a list of polls that happen. We do that before we start propellant loading to make sure that when we load the liquid oxygen that we are ready to go forward with flight. So there's a lot of go, no-go polls, but the last one's really the exciting one where you want to hear everything from the range. So the range is making sure that the weather's good and we're ready to go there. We have our chief engineer that's making sure that all the engineering functions, that everyone is reporting green and nominal.
All right, and that should be coming up in just a few minutes now, so we'll be listening in on that pretty soon. And from Holly Gully on Twitter, she asks, is any part of this vehicle reusable?
No, the Antares actually is not reusable. That is something that we looked at. It's a considerable cost to go and retrieve a first or second stage back. And in fact, Cygnus is on purpose not reusable. It is made to burn up upon reentry. That way we dispose of all the trash from the space station.
Makes sense. Thanks. Just a reminder, you can send in your own questions using that hashtag AskNASA.
And CMD-LC, countdown 1.
Now 16 minutes away from today's 6:37 a.m. launch of Antares, again with the orbital ATK Cygnus spacecraft on top, and everything is still looking good for its on-time launch. Amanda mentioned earlier that Cygnus is carrying more than 7,000 pounds of cargo up to the space station, and included in that is computer hardware, spacewalking hardware, food, new cameras for the space station, and supplies needed for dozens of experiments. Several of those experiments are on-board CubeSats that Cygnus will launch after it departs the space station. CubeSats are nanosatellites that usually weigh just a few pounds and provide opportunities for small experiments to fly on rockets as auxiliary payloads. One experiment flying today inside a CubeSat on board Cygnus is the E. coli antimicrobial satellite, which is going to investigate the effects of microgravity on the antibiotic resistance of E. coli, which is responsible for urinary tract infections here on Earth. Different types of E. coli will be exposed to different antibiotic concentrations and then examined for viability using a dye that reveals metabolic activity. Living in microgravity can weaken the human immune system, so antibiotic-resistant diseases are a potential danger for astronauts. This experiment could help determine the correct antibiotic doses to protect astronauts. And for those of us here on Earth, it'll give us a better understanding of how bacteria responds to stress and how that impacts their antibiotic resistance, which could help for future antibiotic design. The Orbital Communications and Sensor Demonstration is another CubeSat-based experiment launching on Cygnus today. That one is looking at two cross-cutting capabilities that could help future space missions versus high-speed optical data transmission, and then also small spacecraft proximity operations. The satellites for the experiment will use a laser communication system hard-mounted to the satellite itself that will be pointed by controlling the satellite's orientation, which makes it more compact than anything previously flown in space. The satellite's orientation will be controlled by star trackers that measure the position of stars within 0.05 degrees. That's 20 times more precise than anything previously demonstrated in satellites of this size. That'll provide valuable research into the need for low-cost sensors that small spacecraft can use to assist in maneuvering and operating safely in close proximity to other spacecraft or objects in space. One more CubeSat experiment on board Cygnus today is the integrated solar array and reflect array antenna experiment, which will demonstrate an antenna that will increase downlink data rates from the previous baseline of 6.9 kilobytes per second to more than 100 megabytes per second. That increase would allow CubeSats and other small satellites to perform missions that were previously only possible on larger and more costly satellites. And for an example of an experiment that will be performed inside the space station, there's also the biological nitrogen fixation in microgravity experiment. That one looks at how the space station's microgravity affects the nitrogen fixation process. Nitrogen fixation is a natural fertilizer that's necessary for most types of plant growth, including the microclover, which will be used for this experiment. In particular, bacteria develops a symbiotic relationship with the microclover to convert nitrogen into the atmosphere into organic compounds in the plant's roots. But processes that work on Earth are often changed without gravity on the space station, so this experiment will evaluate how it works in space. It could help us learn more about how to best cultivate plants for food in future long-term missions.
With final countdown. GSO. And GSO, LC, countdown 1.
GSO.
Yeah, step 425, pull to proceed with final countdown.
GSO, go.
GSO is go, RSO.
RSO is go.
TD.
TD is go.
MES 1.
MES is go.
GCE.
GCE is go.
ACE.
ACE is go.
Mars.
Mars is go.
CMD.
CMD is go.
LD.
LD is go.
OA.
Remembering J.R. Thompson and Gene Cernan today, whose memories and legacies will live on for their great contributions to space exploration. OA is go.
Copy that. OA is go. Launch team is go to proceed with final countdown at T minus 10 minutes.
Go safety. Okay, so that's cleared with the range and FAA. Well, they're
Just heard there a go, no go poll that gets us into the final preparations for Cygnus's launch today, coming up at 6:37, just 10 minutes away now. For those just joining via Facebook Live, welcome to the live coverage of the Orbital ATK Commercial Resupply Services 8 mission to launch the space station. Cygnus cargo vehicle sitting on top of the Antares rocket on Launch Pad 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport at Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia. And everything is looking good for that planned 6:37 a.m. Central launch coming up here in just 10 minutes.
And launch team countdown has resumed. Check set 426. Ops 1, you go to enable stage 1 controller and ACS VDMs.
We're now out of that last 10-minute hold and getting into the final countdown. At 6:37, Antares will lift off and begin making a 9-minute and 6-second climb to orbit before separating from Cygnus, which will then go on to make its way to the International Space Station with about 7,400 pounds of cargo to deliver, including supplies for dozens of science experiments.
Rotated, indicator illuminated.
And Ops 1, you go to ARM stage 1 controller ODM.
LC Ops 1, stage 1 controller, ODM armed.
Copy that. Ops 2, step 432, set stage 1 controller EPV VREFs.
LC Ops 2, stage 1 controller VRF set.
And Ops 2, initialize ground ordnance power supplies.
Ground ordnance power supplies initialized.
Roger that, Ops 2. Elect 1, verify ground ordnance power supplies initialized and nominal. And elect 1, LC, countdown 1.
Yeah, elect 1's on. Do you see the bus voltage? I don't see the bus voltage.
Ops 2.
Did I hit no again?
LC recommend we resend that command.
Go, Ops 2.
Command sent.
Okay, LC elect 1, ground ordnance power supplies nominal.
Copy that. Check 434. Site control, I'll wait for your confirmation that we have GN2 conditioning started.
Site control copy.
MES1, can you confirm engines ready for fuel circuit priming?
Engines are ready for priming.
Copy that. Ops 2.
Just under 8 minutes away now from today's launch, and you're looking at the Orbital ATK Mission Control in Dulles, Virginia, where everything is still going well for that 6:37 a.m. liftoff.
And Ops 2, we're going to go ahead and press. Terminate engine evacuation.
Ops 2 copy.
And there is the Antares rocket on the pad at Wallops in Virginia. The journey to space will take Cygnus about 2 days to get to the space station after making its way to orbit, and the Expedition 53 team is eagerly awaiting it. Commander Randy Bresnik and Flight Engineer Paolo Nespoli will be on hand to use the space station's robotic arm to grab onto it at about 4:40 a.m. Central Time on Monday.
VCT open time 12:30:10.
Copy that. And prop fleet, I'll wait for your call when we have OCCS activation of VTSO. MES1, I'll wait for your call when you have engine priming status.
MES copies.
LC prompt lead VTSO activation verified.
Copy, check 440.
Once arriving at the space station, Cygnus will be sticking around until December 4th when the crew will use the robotic arm again to unberth it from the Unity node, where it's going to be installed, and then send it on its way. But in those 5 weeks, there will be a flurry of activity to unload its 7,400 pounds of supplies and hardware that it's delivering. Again, the team here on the ground completed their no-go poll just a few minutes ago, checking with each discipline and control team to make sure all the bases are covered and everything is ready and in place for 6:37 a.m. Central Time liftoff, just a little over 5 minutes from now.
VRG activated.
Copy, Ops 2 and Ops 2. Your go to close FPVs.
We have Amanda Davis here with us from the ATK from the ATK team. Amanda, what's left to do in these last few minutes?
So right now we're listening to everyone do the final power checks and final arming. So that's where I know that we're really getting ready to go, and I can hear them doing the final arming of the vehicle. At this point, we still have people that are literally pushing the buttons to command the vehicle, but about 3 minutes out, that's when it goes over to the auto sequence, and the vehicle has its own flight computer, and that takes over and commands the vehicle for the last couple minutes before we finally take off and into flight.
Okay, so everything's looking good so far. Again, counting down to 6:37 a.m. Central Time when Antares is going to be launching from Wallops in Virginia, heading to the International Space Station with the Cygnus cargo vehicle on top of it.
FTS on B loop, opening green.
FTS, report FCLU status. FTS, LC, countdown 1.
FTLU and FTS receiver indications are nominal.
Copy, Ops 1, your go to send all arm command.
All arms set.
Elect 1, report SNAs and ODM status.
LC Elect 1, SNAs, ODMs, all armed.
NASA TV, report range status.
Range is green.
Copy, range green. GNC 1, verify ready for nav mode.
LC GNC 1, SIGI ready for nav.
Copy that. Ops 2, your go to mode SIGI to navigate.
Copy that, LC. SIGI nav.
And GNC 1, report SIGI status.
LC GNC 1, SIGI nav mode nominal.
Copy that. We'll check all steps through 456. And we'll have phase 3 dynamic limits setting at T-minus 3 minutes.
LC Elect 1 verified. Mission time set to T-minus 180 at T-minus 310.
Copy, Elect 1.
Now 3 minutes away from today's 6:37 a.m. Central Time launch. This point will be going into the terminal countdown, and any red flags that crop up between now and launch will stop the countdown. But at the moment, everything is looking good. Send Cygnus and its 7,400 pounds of cargo off to the space station on time.
And Core 1, 463. Core 1 LC, countdown 1.
LC, this is Stage 1, Core 1 lost telemetry. I can confirm VTSOU is open.
EHS charging is nominal.
Copy that. Copy all. EHS charging nominal. And we'll have T-minus 2 minutes on my mark. Mark.
2 minutes now to go until liftoff, and everything continuing to proceed as planned.
Copy, fleet test initiated. It will be at T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds on my mark. Mark.
Oxidizer prepressurization has started.
Copy. We got preliminary ox tank press started.
Negative, negative. Go ahead. LC, we are red. We have an aircraft in the hazard area.
Copy that. Abort, abort, abort. This is LC on countdown net. Abort, abort, abort. Proceed to the abort safing checklist.
LC Ops 1 launch. Enable button removed.
As you're hearing the teams on the ground talk about they noticed an aircraft in the area, so have had to abort, but they do have a 5-minute window, so we'll see if they're able to turn it around in time for liftoff just a little later than planned.
And launch team LC, proceed to page 156, abort safing operations. Step Alpha 2, prop lead.
And LC Alpha 2 not required.
Copy that. Alpha 2 not required. And prop lead, step Alpha 3.
Alpha 3 not required.
And I copy that. Ops 1, you go for step Alpha 4, disable local launch enable button at the failsafe panel and verify local indicator is extinguished.
Launch enable removed. Verify local and global buttons off.
Copy that. Ops 1 and GSO, disable local launch enable button at failsafe panel.
And with that aircraft moving into the area, the team here on the ground is deciding to scrub the launch for the day. We'll listen in as they work through their steps to back out of the preparations for a launch and hold on to get plans together for try again.
Go to deactivate arm enable at the failsafe panel.
Arm enable deactivated, no longer illuminated.
And I copy that. Ops 1 and Ops 1, step Alpha 8, safe vehicle SNAs and vehicle and ground ODMs and verify ODM safe.
Everything else leading up to today's planned 6:37 a.m. launch was going well, except for that final call to scrub the launch due to an aircraft in the area just before the countdown got down to 0.
SNA indicator is safe and red. FTSA indicator safe and red. FTSB indicator safe and red. Pressing the all ODM safe button. Can now verify FC ODMs are safe. Stage 1 ordnance/EPV ODMs safe. Ground ODMs safe.
And I copy all Ops 1. We'll check Alpha 8 complete. And elect 1, step Alpha 9, verify vehicle ODMs indicate safe. And verify Aura Stage 2 ignition SNA safe indication and telemetry.
LC elect 1, vehicle ODMs verified safe. Stage 2 ignition, SNA safe indication, and FTSA. And
So, Amanda, what are the teams on the ground doing now that we do have that scrub declared for today?
Alpha 10, Alpha 11. Site control, step Alpha 12, disarm tail, rapid.
So right now they're doing detanking, so that is basically taking the liquid propellants that we've loaded onto the vehicle and putting them back into the tanks on the ground. This way we will be able to turn around for tomorrow and do the fueling again so we can conserve those fuels. So right now they're doing that. Afterwards they'll also be selectively shutting down the electrical systems and making sure that the batteries are fully charged for tomorrow. So that we do have procedures for this. We know that this can happen. We have had aircraft or sea vessels in an area which are not allowed during flight. So unfortunately that is something that has occurred today. We do our best to try to clear the area. Wallops Flight Facility does have the ability to monitor and let folks know where they cannot be during launch day. Unfortunately, we do get occasional violations of that, like today.
And I know that's hard for the team on the ground. You mentioned earlier they've been on console for about 8 hours and we're probably on the edge of their seats waiting for liftoff just like we were.
I'd like MES's confirmation, but I believe that step's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard to go back and get some sleep because they're going to have to get up around 1 a.m. again tomorrow. So hopefully everyone will be able to wind down after these activities. We do have a couple shifts of folks that will be out there getting the pad ready for the next day. So we do plan for these events. I just hope that our crew can get some good rest and be ready for tomorrow.
Me too.
Repeat the step, please.
Yeah, step Alpha 13. This is on page 159 of abort safing operations.
Copy, LC. Not required.
Okay, roger that. And site control, what status on Alpha 14?
It's in work. I had to go to CCT. My screen's down. It's in work.
Okay, copy, site control.
And LC site control. ECU core 1 flow rate is 1158.
Yeah, site control, standby 1. And GSO, can I get you on engineering 1?
Once again, the teams are on the ground are working through backing out of procedures that were getting ready for today's planned launch at 6:37 a.m. Central Time, but that, of course, was scrubbed due to a last-minute aircraft moving into the area. So they are turning things around for another attempt tomorrow. We'll be here on NASA TV to cover that beginning at 5:45 a.m. Central Time, and the launch would actually occur at 6:14 a.m. That would get the Cygnus in orbit and en route for a Tuesday arrival at the International Space Station. Capture would be set to, coverage of capture will begin at 3:45 a.m. Central Time on Tuesday. So with that information, we'll leave you and hope to see you back again tomorrow for another try at launching the Cygnus mission. And that, again, coverage will be starting at 5:45 a.m. Central Time, 6:45 a.m. Eastern, for a launch at 6:14 a.m. Central. Thanks so much, and this is Mission Control Houston.